guess we don't say thank you enough, you know? Or for me, you know, it's like, yeah, like I think of it sometimes like, what would a 300-year-old sycamore tree say if suddenly it opened its barky eyes and had just one sentence at its disposal, you know? Would it be like, you know, after 300 years, then it opens its eyes? It's like, oh, this? You know, or like, I wish it were, I was hoping it would be something else, you know? Like, I have to imagine it would open its eyes and it would say, oh, thank you. You know? One of my teachers is a Navajo medicine man I met in, sort of through my walk. I spent 2 weeks walking through the Navajo Nation. And one of the practices he's invited me into is the practice of the all-night ceremony, where you sit up together in circle all night long. And he uses the language of prayer, you know, and what that looks like is people having space to be deeply listened to. You know, there's no time crunch when you're sitting up all night, you know. There's no, and like the part of you that's like, oh, I should probably hurry through this, is like, yeah, but we have like 8 more hours here. You know what I mean? It's marathon listening to the max. And when there's that space for you to unfold, and where you don't have to apologize for taking up that space, there seem to be parts of us that come out to be seen, witnessed, and held by the collective attention of the group that can't come out any other way. And to me, that's what healing is. You know, when these experiences I've lived, these wounds I've suffered, you know, have a chance, have some breathing room. They're in a space where it's understood that we're all human here, which means we're going to take some hits along the way. And that maybe those hits have some wisdom for us and some gift for us, if only we can share them with one another and trust them to one another. And those kinds of experiences, those kinds of parts of ourselves, in my experience, can't really come out in the hustle and flow of daily life, and the rush and tumble, and you know, and surrounded by people who don't care, you know. And so finding myself in ceremony with Daryl, my teacher and friend, and a circle of other human beings who have taken a brave step into a space where they're saying, yeah, I'm willing to be in the circle, you know, I'm willing, you know, how might you be feeling right now if we were all in a circle and there weren't any desks in front of us, you know what I mean? Like exposed, a little exposed, like seen, right? And you know, what each person chooses to share or express in that space, like what kind of what kind of expression takes place is totally unique, and there's no wrong way to be, you know. But sometimes everyone falls asleep, you know. And Daryl is like holding space for this experience, and he has said to me before, you know, when everyone falls asleep, and it's just me sitting up, the only prayer left to pray is thank you. Yeah, like once we pass through all of the grieving that's there for us, that's asking for our attention and energy, after we pass through and show up to the work of, you know, looking at the things I haven't wanted to look at all my life, you know, and doing the hard work of learning how to entrust that to another person, and this inner journey. You know, on this walk, I was as much on an inner journey of coming to know myself, which included meeting all the parts of myself that I had been avoiding, you know, all the parts of myself that my education didn't recognize as primarily important. You know, the matters of the heart were sort of framed as secondary to everything else, you know, like the philosophy and the mathematics and the economics. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, but I am saying that, yeah, if our education doesn't revolve around the truths and realities of the human heart, which rest upon a foundation of vulnerability, you know, which is to say we're all heartbroken, you know, or will be. And if that is sort of dismissed as secondarily important, or a distraction from the real thing of whatever education might be, we're missing out, you know, not just on the great gift of getting to connect with one another deeply, which can only happen when vulnerability is a part of the conversation. But we're also making it just about impossible for ourselves to evolve, you know, not just as individuals, but as a nation and as a world of nations. Because if we haven't, you know, been willing to face the realities of the pain of being human, we're living a half-truth. I was gonna say we're living a lie, but that sounds kind of dramatic, you know? We're living not quite the whole truth. Okay, what does this have to do with walking across America? I didn't come here to hear this, you know what I mean? How many friggin' shoes did you wear? You know, that's why I'm here. What's coming to mind now is, so, how many of you have read the book? Cool. All right. So I am gonna have to say a thing or two about that. Yeah, you're like, dude. Okay, I'll start with that. I graduated from college, and I felt that something was missing, you know. And what I just described, I couldn't articulate at the time. But the fact that I sat in classroom after classroom after classroom and never really actually got to know in a real, authentic, sincere, vulnerable, intimate way the people I was sitting with, or my teachers for that matter. I never got a peek into the real human struggle that we were all going through. Anxiety, depression, young people committing suicide left and right. It's there. It's there, all right, you know. But that stuff was relegated to a counselor's office or to the booze-infused debauchery of a weekend, you know what I mean? And not just the weekend. There weren't any circles like the one I was describing at the beginning of this. There weren't any places where we were able to recognize the deep humanness of each other. And to honor our struggles and problems as gifts. Not as something to be fixed, as gifts to be given. And there's wisdom somewhere inside them, or just deep connection. You know, when someone entrusts something real, some heartbrokenness to me, it's like they're taking me down into the depths of what's possible, the depths of love, you know? As opposed to saying, oh no, I'm fine, you know, I'm great, I'm always good, which is kind of what we're trained to do, you know? It's kind of what we're trained to do in America. I hate to say it, but. So, no, it's not true, I think it's important to say. It's scary to say, because it does kind of go against the grain of what we were taught, you know? But I think it's important to say that something like sadness isn't welcomed as a natural part of the human experience here in American culture. And so when we experience it, we think something's wrong with us. And when we're not modeling for our children that it's okay to be sad, and to show them that beautiful grief, the grief of longing, the grief of heartbrokenness, which is nothing but the grief of love, you know? Like when we're not showing that to our kids, and then they inevitably encounter sadness, because they will, and they haven't been given permission to be sad because they haven't seen any adults being sad, they're going to think something's really wrong with them, you know? So that's a problem, and I think it's important that that problem is spoken to. And I guess I'm just kind of growing into, I'm learning how to speak to that, you know? Okay, let's see if I can rein it in, Andrew. Rein it in. Okay. Graduated from college and felt that something was missing. That's the short way of putting it. Instead of pretending I didn't feel what I was feeling, I wanted to really follow that impulse. You know, really wanted to know, what is this I'm feeling? And the way I was able to channel that was I framed my confusion and my uncertainty around the phenomenon of coming of age. I said to myself, I have done everything my culture told me to do. I went to high school, I got good grades, I went to a college, a great college, I got good grades, and yet I still feel that something is missing here. I don't know what it is. I checked off all the boxes and still here, you know. So I said, okay, maybe if I go to somewhere far, far away and see how they raise their young people into adulthood, maybe I'll see something there that I didn't experience here. So I said I was gonna study coming of age in indigenous communities, and I applied for this fellowship and made a bulletproof proposal, and it didn't get past the first round. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Didn't get past the first round. But the experience of applying had helped me clarify the urgency of whatever it was I needed to go seeking. You know, like I need to go seek that. I don't know what it is, but I got it. So I didn't have the money I thought I was going to have, and had all those questions, and decided that I would just walk out my mom's back door and start trying to see each and every person as my teacher. Each and every person. I was going to try to put on this perspective. Okay, all of a sudden now, everyone has lived something worthy of being listened to. And all of a sudden, you have survived something, endured something, scraped through something that is a jewel, you know, and has within it the seeds of wisdom and deserves respect, deep regard and respect, which tend to be things, I think respect, real respect, the kind of respect that we experience in that circle. Respect for the truth of you, of your vulnerability, of your heart, of your uniqueness. I'm not here trying to tell you how to be, like that kind of respect. I want to see you. That kind of listening respect, I think, is endangered in America today. We hear that word tossed around a lot, respect, you know. But what does it actually mean? Etymologically, respect means, I think it comes from maybe a Latin word, respicere. I never studied Latin, so I don't know if I said it right, you know. Respicere, to see again, or to look back at. To look back at, to see again. So when I'm respecting you, I'm seeing you. And the story I make out of a look back at, you know, it's like, it's one thing to really see you, but more often than not, what I'm seeing, it's like I'm seeing you through a filter of my assumptions about you, or my projections about you. Oh, you're a black so-and-so, you're a skinhead so-and-so, you've got tattoos all over, so you must be such and such. And I see that. I see my own ideas about who you are, instead of seeing you. So I look away from who you actually are, at my assumptions about who you are, and to respect you is to look away from those falsehoods and to look back at you. And now I'm respecting you. Okay, who actually are you? Okay, you believe some weird racist thing about such and such and so-and-so, like, right, that's triggering me, that's bringing up assumptions and emotions, but like, how did you get to be that way? And can I still listen to you, you know? Respect is what I was learning on this walk. Respect. How to respect people. As a lifestyle, you know? How to slow down enough to see them as my teacher. To me, that's what respect is. It's like, yeah, there's something you're living that I don't know, you know? There's something you've learned that no one else quite knows, like you know it. And we'd both be missing out on an opportunity if I wasn't willing and able to listen to you. Really listen, really listen. So that's what I wanted to happen, and I had no idea what would happen, you know, and but the intensity of my questions and my longing was strong enough for me to just not really care, you know, what would happen or not. It's like, I know I have to do this, I have to find out. And so I packed up a backpack full of 50 pounds of stuff, printed out a sign that said, "Walking to listen," figuring that would be like a concise invitation for people. Walking to listen, okay. And then walked out Mom's back door. Not yet. Into the full-blown uncertainty of things, you know. Vulnerable, on the side of the road. I decided I wanted to walk on the roads the whole way, not the trails, because I wanted to meet as diverse a cross-section of people as possible. So I was on the roads, walking, sleeping wherever it was I ended up at the end of the day. You know, because you get to a spot and it's dark, and there's a motel or something 5 miles down the road. You get there like that in the car, but 5 miles is like going to be 2 hours. You know, you're not going to make it. So, and that was a part of what I liked about the experience, you know, and I didn't have a budget for motels anyways, you know. I was wherever I was at the end of the day, and it wasn't going to be anywhere else. And the question was kind of like, all right, what does walking to listen look like right here, right now? When you need help, when you need a place to stay, you know? When you need a little patch of ground to pitch your tent, what does it look like now to be humbled, you know, to be humbled, to need help, again, which kind of, oh God, it just, once again, it kind of goes against the American dream, you know, to ask for help. It's not very American, I wouldn't say, you know, it's like, it's to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, that's what you hear, right? Like the self-made man, self-made woman kind of a thing, you know, do it yourself, DIY life. Which, you know, neglects, I think, the reality of things, which is to say, there's never been a point in any of our lives where we've ever actually been independent, you know, constantly depending on one another, on the sun, you know, to warm the earth and grow the vegetables and water. I mean, just a countless, infinite number of relations that we depend on. So we're never independent. And the act of I think, softening and relaxing into the truth of that, into the truth of our beautiful interdependence. Yeah, I'm just thinking of these young people, you know, these young men in particular who aren't, who find themselves in this catch-22, you know, where, and I don't think we're any different really, you know, it's like we inevitably get to those points in our lives where we need help, you know, but the catch-22 is if we admit that and ask for it, we will be perceived as, or will perceive ourselves as, weak or something, you know? I'm so sorry, but no. So it's about telling a new story, and I was forced into the act of asking for help every day, and it did rub up against my conditioning, you know? It did make me uncomfortable. And what I began to find was that the more I did it, the more connection it created in my life. You know, funny how that works, you know? And not everyone wanted to go there with me, you know, not everyone was willing to help. I remember knocking on so sometimes I would knock on people's doors, you know, I would get to a home, would knock on their door and say, hey, I'm Andrew, I'm walking across America. You know, can you imagine? Someone knocking on your door at night, it's like, I'm listening to people's stories, you know, and looking for a safe place to pitch my tent for the night. Like, can I use your lawn? You know, and different people responded differently. And I remember one woman in Georgia said, sure, no problem, yeah, go ahead and pitch it right there. No, yeah, it's great. Very friendly, very open. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Because I had so much anxiety at the end of the day, dread. You know, I'm like hundreds or thousands of miles from home. I'm sweaty, I'm stinky, I'm exhausted, I'm probably lonely, you know, and I don't know where I want to sleep. Like, scared, you know. And so when someone would offer me a safe place to stay, and more often than not, I ended up spending the night underneath a roof of some sort. 75% of the time, over the course of a whole year on the road, people took me into their homes, or into their bars, or their general stores, or their mariachi radio stations, or their alligator ranches. These are all places I stayed, you know. Their general stores, their fire stations. I don't know if I ever stayed in a police station. And so I had a great sense of relief. She said, you can pitch the tent. I got my tent set up, I got my little home. Oh, what a relief. After being seen on the road all day, you're exposed, you're being seen. It was so nice to just like cuddle up and curl up and not be seen at all. You know, it's my own little world. And then I hear this woman go, Andrew? I go, yeah? She goes, I'm so sorry, baby, but you're not going to be able to stay here tonight after all. I said, okay, totally fine. She said, I'm so sorry, I just called my husband and let him know. And, yeah, exactly. And he said you can't stay. I said, okay, that's okay. And she goes, I'm so sorry, honey. He's a veteran, you know. And he was in Vietnam, and he would just think you're going to break into the house at night and cut him up into little pieces. Which I think is such a perfect, it's kind of like a perfect example of what so many of us, probably all of us in some ways, are carrying. This deep-seated dread and fear of one another. Because we have seen what we're capable of doing to each other. This man in particular had seen it on the battlefield. He's seen what humans are capable of, you know, and he's traumatized. And he's now living, believing that anyone could do what he saw people do to each other, or what maybe he did to somebody, you know. And he probably hasn't had a space to grieve, you know, in the kind of a circle the likes of which I was talking about at the beginning. a circle where we can say, hey, we want to see that. We actually need to see that because you saw something on the front lines that ought to inform how we live our lives here, you know? And if you don't share how that affected you, we're not going to understand the true cost of something like war, you know? It'll be a concept for most of us, unless you're willing to share that beautiful grief with us. But how can any veteran or anybody be expected to do something like that if there isn't a space specifically designed for it, you know? If there isn't an understanding of the gift of grief, if there isn't a fluency in the listening required for something like grief to move. You know, am I going to be able to grieve if someone's constantly talking at me and telling me what I'm supposed to be doing? You know, probably not. So listening. I remember I knocked on one door in Virginia, you know, same thing. Hey, and before I could say anything, an old woman with an oxygen tank answered the door, her little dog there. And I go, hi, I'm in. And she goes, no. So I'm like, well, okay, great. I guess I'm supposed to be somewhere else today, you know? So I guess I'll just try to say one last thing about why I feel so passionate about sharing this message of listening, of trustworthy listening, and then see where we want to go. I can tell some stories, maybe hear why you came and what some of what I'm saying here stirs in you, you know, or just we can be a little more co-creative of it. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why is it important to ask sincerely in the way that you did at the beginning of this meeting? Like, what is listening? It's such a beautiful question because, again, there's an openness there. There's an openness there that, it's like, I can't learn something new if I think I already know everything about it. You know what I mean? It's kind of a basic sort of thing, but to just have that openness, why is that important for us to have that openness around this practice of listening? And it takes me back to the beginning of this talk. And to the necessity, this through line, through everything I'm saying tonight is going to be the necessity of expression, of a truthful, vulnerable, heartful expression, and the necessity of learning how to become someone who can invite and honor and receive and encourage that expression. Why does it actually matter? I got to meet the first black mayor of Selma, Alabama on this walk. The chief of police there put me up in town in a police trailer and introduced me to the whole town, you know. And I spent 3 or 4 days in Selma and just so happened to be there on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You know how in Forrest Gump, like, he just happens to be in the right place at the right time every time? He like meets the president and he meets so-and-so. I kind of felt like Forrest Gump in Selma. I was like, that timing worked out nice. You know?
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
When was this? What
This
year?
was in 2011 and 2012. Yeah. So thousands of years ago. We live in a new world now. And not, you know. So James Perkins heard I was in town. Chief Riley introduced us, and former Mayor Perkins said he wanted to take me out to Chinese for dinner. And it was one of those things that was just like, what? It should be the other way around. You know, like, what did I do to deserve this? And I asked him, I was like, I don't feel like I deserve this. Like, what did I do for this? And he said, you walked. You walked. And what I hear in that now is you cared enough, and you care enough to listen as if what I have to say about whatever it is you're wondering about matters, and as if the hundreds of people and then thousands of people that you meet on this walk, what they have to say matters. You walked, you know? Okay. Well, I am pretty hungry, so. So we were sitting over this Chinese buffet, this plate full, you know, and he said, one of the reasons why there's still such festering resentment when it comes to race and racism in America is that we never committed ourselves to a process of truth and reconciliation, and we weren't willing to sit with the pain of what happened, you know? Yeah, on both sides, you know? And then he said, it's one thing to know what you know about your history, which is kind of what happens in school, right? We are given the knowledge, we're given the facts hopefully. I guess it depends on the school you're going to, you know. But we're given the knowledge of what happened, he said, but it's another thing entirely to feel what you feel about your history. It's one thing to know what you know about it, and you can take this as our collective national history or your personal history. It's one thing to know what you know about it, but it's another thing entirely to feel what you feel about it. And until we feel that, we're not going to be able to heal it, is what he told me. Until we feel that stuff, we're not going to be able to move on. It's going to be caught. It's going to be caught, and it'll keep running and running and running and running, you know? So, okay, what does this have to do with listening? My question is, how can any of us be expected to feel the intensities of the trauma from which we come, of the pain that each one of us has encountered at one point in our lives? And again, we talk about this personally or America, you know? How can any of us be expected to feel this stuff if we're not in the presence of people who are practicing trustworthy listening? I'm not gonna share with you my heartbrokenness and my anger and my whatever that is. I'm not gonna share that with you if I think you're gonna laugh at me when I share it. I'm not gonna share that with you if I suspect that you'll just walk away or engage in some kind of argument or debate with me. I'm not gonna share that with you if I don't sense that you have made of yourself a trustworthy listener. And so what ends up happening, because the vast majority of us aren't, is what I would say, because that there's an endemic absence of listening in this culture, we walk around with these vast chasms and worlds of truthful experience, emotions, insights, struggles, hurts, that end up just staying there because we haven't encountered someone who has become that trustworthy presence. And it's back to James Perkins' thing. Until we feel that, we can't heal that, you know? We've got to feel that. So I'm remembering in high school history class, and I loved that class, and I loved my teacher. Continued. He hosted me for a talk, actually, recently. I was never asked, okay, now you just learned all this stuff about whatever it is, World War II, slavery, history of sexism, the history of whatever it is. You learned all this stuff. Now, how do you feel about it? that matters. How you feel about it matters. And we didn't even approach talking about the personal. That was something we took care of in the sort of stigmatized space of the counselor's office. And the fruit that's there for us when we're willing to accept the beauty of our struggle just rotted on the vine. We never got to experience that with one another. We dumped it out on the counselor as if it were some sort of toxic poison, when in fact there was this great gift. If only we had been sitting in a circle, and listening to one another express. To me, it's like a song, when someone is speaking from that heartbroken, vulnerable, truthful, human place, and saying, the hell with it, I'm going to trust each one of you in this space, and just sing it and be real. Like, when someone's speaking from that place, that is music to my ears. That is a beautiful song, and it might be a grief song, or it might be an anger song. But if it's coming from that truthful place, there's nothing else I'd rather hear. It helps me see, that's who you are, and that's what I want to know. This is you. I don't want to know my assumptions about you, or I'm not so interested in anything else, really. I want to know the truth of who you are.
It's kind of like, it's the humanness.
The humanness. Yeah. Yes, the humanness. Not some idea that the media fed us about what we're supposed to look like, or not some idea. It's like, who's the human here,
Did you notice different parts of the country, different reactions to your walking to listen? Or is that too stereotypical to say that, this section would be warmer than that section?
Yeah. Well, I think across the board, I was generally surprised at the openness that people brought to me. And I think there are lots of reasons why that openness was there. And I think it's important to state and name that how people responded to me would have been different if I weren't white, There would have been a whole host of other projections that I, as a human being, would have had to dance with. Being white comes with its own projections, but that was a dynamic. And then being a man, and being a person who presents as cisgender and straight, all these, I look a certain way. White, straight dude looking kind of a human, And so surely that had something to do with how people approached or didn't approach, So that's sort of one aspect that could be a whole talk here, and deserves. Again, we gotta feel it to heal it. There's lots of feeling to be done there. There was a woman, an older woman, who raised a hand at a talk I gave a couple weeks ago, and she said basically, like, how do you think this walk would have been different if you were a woman? And it wasn't. I could tell it wasn't really a question. You understand? Yeah. She was like, she had something to say. And I had the presence of mind to ask her, what do you have to say about this? I don't know. You're a woman. You tell me how you think this might have been different. And she offered a brief but powerful sharing about how she thought it might have been different, and it was filled with anger, a rightful anger. Yeah, it's messed up. It's messed up, and that's just the beginning of what we could say about it, And there was another person who raised her hand, another older woman, and she started talking to kind of say, yeah, but like men have their things, and I just said, let's just hold on a second. Let's just sit with that. Like the whole healing by feeling thing, let's just feel that. There's so much more there. But we got a little taste. Let's just feel that, uncomfortable. The other reason why I think people responded to me in the way that they did is because I was walking with openness. Sure, there's like my body and how it looks and all that, And I was walking with this intention to open and be opened. And I think when people felt that, and then intuited or sensed that they could trust it, they opened as often as if they'd been waiting their whole lives to. I think of this image of water in the desert. You know, it's like you don't realize you're walking through a desert of intimacy, a desert of deep connection, a desert of listening, until you find yourself at an oasis and you drink water and you're like, oh my God, I've been dying of thirst. You know what I mean? And I was learning how to become the nourishing waters of listening. You know. And we all do it in our own way, you know. And the way that people responded to me, and the way that people often continue to respond to me in my life, because the walk continues, you know. I did drive here, but listening, you know, is a lifelong apprenticeship, is the way I see it. And walking with that intention to listen, which is something I do every day. I want to connect deeply. I want to listen. You know, it's like, it's why I'm here. Seeing the way that we respond to that with this kind of feeling of, oh, here's water at last in this desert, for me maybe it's not proof of the desert, but it's certainly suggestive of where we happen to find ourselves. When people, it was like, just time and time again, having moments with folks where they just started sharing the stories of their lives as if they'd been waiting to for a long time. Yeah.
I have a million logistics for
Yeah,
question, but they're not as interesting right now.
Yeah.
Did you go into, when you met someone, or you asked to spend the night, or got to the point where you were talking, did you ask a number of questions or introduce your trip, or did you just really listen, and let it evolve more naturally? Did they then ease into talking to you?
Yeah. It sort of began with the logistics, you know. It began simply, you know. I'm Andrew. If I was at the end of the day looking for a place to stay, I would say that. Or if it was the middle of the day and I just was looking for a cold drink, gas station, whatever, you know, here I am. This is what I'm doing. I'm walking across America, listening to people's stories, and the backpack was a great conversation starter, a great icebreaker, you know. And what I found most of the time was once people realized they were in the presence of someone who really was listening and really did care, they were ready to take me up on the invitation and begin telling me what they thought about things, and then sometimes what they had lived to get them to the point where they were now believing those things. And hardly had any questions for me at all. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like we're holding our breaths, right? It's like, and like as soon as there's a breath of fresh air there, it's like, you know, and you're not really concerned about. You're just like, I gotta breathe. I gotta be listened to, and we often have shame about that because these things that we have to share are gifts, are beauty. Yeah.
I just had a quick thought. I wonder, because you were passing through, they felt safer.
Oh yeah.
Because they weren't going to see you every day for the next year.
Oh yeah. Yes.
They felt safe to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
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 Did you write every day? Did you record? How did you?
I journaled just about every day. I wrote a little bit on my travel blog, and I did record some conversations. And sometimes I recorded some like diary entries myself. And to your point about
it was safe. It was safe for them.
It felt safer for them to open up to a stranger.
Right.
Yeah, I like that is such a fascinating dynamic. And you know, the way I think about it is like it is harder to open up in these ways to the people we spend our days with. Which is sort of, it's too bad, you know, because, yeah.
I think it's, I was thinking out loud, but I think it's kind of like, they didn't feel like you would judge them.
Yes.
Whereas among people they see every day, they might fear judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
For certain things they would share. We're so guarded.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And protective of ourselves. Look at the social media today.
Oh, yeah.
Kids getting bullied in junior high. I mean, it's so sad. They can't do anything wrong unless there's a video of it and it's plastered in where, you know, there's such a vulnerability that people feel they want to hold on to.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's like a friggin' war zone out there.
It is.
I'm not about to open my heart and share my vulnerable heart with you. When I see, and kids are sensitive. Kids know the truth. They're not going to be fooled. They see each other getting cut down. And I remember I've done some of these circles, you know, with kids, and it's so heartbreaking to watch. You know, you sit down in a circle, and as soon as someone starts sharing something a little real, when someone laughs,
right, that's the judgment,
and that's the judgment, and that's their own pain.
Nervousness. It could be nervousness.
It's nervousness, it's judgment, or it's the ways they've been conditioned to, basically, I would say, be violent. You know, psychological violence, and it's not. They don't. You know.
It's a reaction, but the first kid climbs up, I guess.
Yeah, climbs up or sends something back,
Right.
and then the pain is just ricocheting around the room.
Right.
You know, and so it's a war. It is a war zone out there. You know, an invisible war zone. And I think for those of us who are like ready to start telling a new story and living a new story about what it means to relate to one another and with one another, I think it does mean being willing to be judged. And it feels unfair, and I think it is unfair to ask a child to do that, especially if the adults aren't willing to step out, take that risk, and here I am. Yeah, and you might laugh. And there's a teacher, Adyashanti, I heard him say, your freedom isn't complete until you recognize everyone else's freedom, which includes their freedom to judge you. You know, because if you're attached to them being a certain way and like me all the time and understand me all the time, I'm not free. You know, I'm like bound. I've bound myself to you liking me or something, and that's kind of like that's not freedom. You know. So yeah, it's hard, it's scary, and it feels like the work of being an adult, you know, to open up and risk judgment, you know. And if we're waiting for some guy who's walking to listen across America to share ourselves authentically and vulnerably and truthfully with, we'll be waiting forever, most of us. And then when and even if this random person does come and we do get to share our stories with that stranger, and then they're gone again the next day, it's like, well, you've still got the rest of your life to live. And you're living it with your family and your coworkers and your community. Our community, like, it's like the scariest place to do this and the most essential place to do this. Because that's the little corner of this vast garden of creation that we've been entrusted with. And I've got to take care of my little corner of the garden, you know? Which means doing that with the people I'm living in proximity, you know, with, living close to. Yeah.
2 questions, if I may.
Yeah.
What were some of the hardest things that you listened to? And you mentioned that people didn't often ask you anything. Did you ever feel like you resented them not wanting to know you?
To the first question, what was hard to listen to? I guess the first thing I would say was I had so much time alone with myself out there that in some ways, what or who I was learning to listen to most was myself. which is to say experiences of loneliness, frustration, doubt, fear, all the things that make me me, all the little voices of whatever they are. I was learning how to listen to all of them. And that was hard, that was hard a lot of the time. When you strip away all the responsibilities you have to show up to in your life, when you strip away all the ways you distract yourself from your life, when it's just you walking.
Would you say that's harder than anybody's story that you listened to?
I don't know if I could compare it, but it was. It was different. It was hard. I mean, sometimes it was ecstatic. Sometimes it was just the utter and complete bliss of being myself and not being at war with any part of myself anymore. There were moments like that. Just like, oh, it's okay. Beautiful. I'll listen to all of it. There's nothing I won't listen to in me. Having that kind of acceptance is like bliss. And sometimes I had a lot of resistance to certain parts of me. So I think what makes listening hard is judgment. I think whether it's listening to something in myself or listening to something in another person, if I'm experiencing it as challenging, it may be the case that I have a judgment about who it is I'm listening to or what it is they're saying. And before that judgment comes a belief in right and wrong, and maybe before that comes a belief in a hierarchy of values. This person believes this thing, they're scum. The judgments, the conclusions, the ideas. And for me, it goes back to listening. If I actually knew who that person was, if they trusted me enough to let me into their lives, to show me their broken heart, just show me that humanness. Where did you get mocked as a kid? Where did you get beaten as a kid? Where did you lose something that was dear to you? If you can just show me that, if only I could see that, it would make judgment much less possible or powerful. Maybe judgment would still be there, but it would be like a hazy little fog, and I'd still be able to remember, oh yeah, and this is a human who has a friggin' broken heart. And maybe they never had the support they got. They didn't get the support they deserve. And maybe that's why they're so bitter. So, yeah, there's a story I could tell. I don't want to ruin anything, though. For all of you who read it. Do we have time for a story?
Sure. I'd like to hear it.
Story? Okay. And then maybe I'll circle back to the end of your question, see if there's maybe one or two more questions, and then we can walk on. What was the second question again?
Did you ever feel like you weren't being listened to?
Oh yeah. Great, thanks. Even and perhaps especially the monsters among us need to be listened to, or the monsters within ourselves. So I was walking along. That's how most of these stories start. I was walking along, and this is outside New Orleans, and people had warned me about walking through New Orleans. They said, don't walk through that place. Those people there will shoot you for the shirt off your back. That was a line I heard. Okay, and normally when I heard something like this, I wanted even more to find out what the truth of that place was. Because again, are you respecting these people? Have you actually listened to those people, whoever it is you're talking about? Or are you seeing them through a filter of your own assumptions about who they are? Don't those people. So I'm like, okay. But enough people had warned me about those people in New Orleans that I did start to feel a little nervous, I don't know. And so I figured, well, I'll find some place to camp on the outskirts of the city. And then I'll wake up really early before all the bad people are awake, because the bad people sleep in, you know. And I'll walk with my 50-pound backpack as quick as I can to the center of town where I have a friend who lives there, you know. And I got to a little bar on the outskirts of town in the bayou, and this guy Rap was there, and he gave me a bowl of chili, and I told him my plan, my master plan. And he goes, you know crackheads don't sleep, right? It's like, huh, I hadn't considered this variable in the equation of my tomorrow. So I was nervous. There was a fire station about a mile away. The sun was setting, getting dark. I'm trying to get to the fire station. Maybe they'll let me camp out. I'm going, and then I hear this, hey! You know, that kind of bark to it, you know? I'm like, you know, whoa. Don't know if I want to engage that guy, you know? Maybe he's not talking to me. Keep walking, then I hear, hey you, Walker! I'm like, oh, he's definitely talking to me. I looked over, and he's this middle-aged white guy, standing like with one of those like white tank top things, up on his porch on the hill on the side of the road. Hey, so I cross the road, and I go, yeah? He goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm Andrew. I'm walking to listening to people and their stories about growing up, and I maybe as far as California, I don't know. I started in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, so you're a damn Yankee. Who the heck invited you down here? And he didn't say heck, you know. He was. I go, well, no one, you know. And in a moment like that, I'm just trying to stay rooted in that intention to listen.
Still give them a chance.
Still, I'm trying.
Right.
I'm trying. Well, I really am just here to listen. No one invited me down here, but well, you're standing on neutral ground. But as soon as you come onto my lawn, that's my taxed land. That's my territory. You go, okay, man. You know, I'm not. If you don't want to go there with me, we don't have to go. And I think there's a way to walk away without severing the connection. You know what I mean? It's like invitation stands. Yeah, I wasn't, you know, I didn't dish it back at him. So, okay. Walk away. And then I hear him go, hey, wait. Yeah. He goes, you like beer? I go, yeah. He goes, you want one? I go, okay, all right. I go up to his porch. And if your heart's been shackled shut your whole life, when you tear it open in a desperate cry for connection, it's probably not just going to stay open, you know? So, and as soon as I came onto his porch, it was, you know, he was like, and you got to leave your backpack. You got to leave your backpack outside, because I don't want you to pull a gun on me or something like that. Okay, yeah. Leave my backpack up. He goes, you got an ID on you? I go, yeah. He goes, let me see it. And as if he had some sort of credibility, or like as if I was trying to get into a club or something, I gave him my ID, you know. And he's like, yeah. You know, I used to work at a liquor store, and this looks like a fake. I swear to you. I go, it's not a fake. I go to reach it. So again, it's one of these things.
Yeah.
What is he actually saying, you know? Often the thing we long for most is the thing we're most afraid of, especially if it requires us to be vulnerable, which connection does, you know? And so he's been, okay. We walk into his house, there are cat toys lying all over the place, and papers, you know? I'm getting to know a little bit more of this guy. And he goes to the beer, oh, I've got these dark beers, you're gonna love them, You know? As if I was making him do all this, you know? And we sit down at the table, and he starts drinking at the Oasis, you know? After God knows how many years walking through the desert of no one caring enough to ask him about who he is. That's a desert. No one cared enough. And I can't say for sure that that's the case, but given the way he expressed, given the way the stories were just spilling out of him, just moments before he was shouting at me, suddenly he has so much to say. Because there was someone who actually cared and respected him enough. And so what was hard to listen to? This man was hard to listen to. His stories were filled, laced, and loaded with violence. And talk about judgment in the form of racism and just meanness and cruelty, And he was sharing this stuff with me.
And you were just absorbing it. You weren't responding to things. Like you weren't commenting, you were just listening.
Yes.
Well, that's hard to do.
Hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was getting triggered. And it was hard not to respond or react. And I don't think trustworthy listening always means not saying something. I think actually it is an osmosis. Connection isn't just someone's dumping everything on me or vice versa. It's saying, eventually, it's getting to a point of saying, hey, thank you so much for sharing, and I just want to let you know that this was some of my experience of listening to you. And I wasn't nearly adept enough at this time to say something like that. I was
Overwhelmed in a way.
overwhelmed. Yeah, I was learning. Still it's hard to say, hey, I just want you to know that what you shared was really hard for me, and and to just share about the personal experience. Because as soon as it becomes a debate, it's over. The connection, the conversation, the possibility of growth is over.
Right.
Because it's so infused with judgment and the false notion of victory. Like, I'm gonna win this. Well, if this is about winning, we'll be fighting forever,
So how did that interaction end?
Yeah, he's telling these stories. I'm doing my best to listen and try to stay honest and truthful. Because again, if it's bringing up a bunch of stuff in me and I'm just like, oh, that's great, that's not truthful. That's not listening. So he's telling one of these stories, and at some point, he sprinkles this little detail in, as if he didn't even say it. He goes, I was really pissed off that day, beat up 3 guys and stabbed one of them in the butt, and I'd had to bury my son the day before, and so, I went and found these guys, and we started this fight, and,
Wow.
and it was just this little thing. But I saw it. I heard it. And if you were to visualize it, it would be as if he had torn open all the armor and for a moment showed me that broken heart. And then, closed up again, but I saw it. And it didn't and doesn't justify. Heartbrokenness doesn't ever justify violence, racism, any of that stuff. But when I am let into someone's heartbrokenness and their humanness, it makes my own inclination toward violence, which can come in the form of judgment, it softens that inclination. It makes me less inclined to hate you if I know some of what you've been through.
Did you address what he had said about his son, or did you just not?
We didn't go there.
Okay.
Yeah, and the position I found myself at that time was, well, for one, I was learning. This is me 10 years later, or not quite, but having practiced more. And then also I was in this vulnerable state of being far away from home, footbound in this guy's home, and I was still a little unsure of how bold I could be in approaching his vulnerability. Because at one point he narrowed his eyes again and he goes, "Where's my cat?
Did you take my cat?"
He must not like you." He said, yeah. It's like, okay, this still could go any which way. You know? And I say, hey man, thanks so much for everything, and I think I'm going to get going. And he goes, oh, well, it's a good thing that guy fed you at the bar, because if he hadn't, then I would have had to. And then he goes, and you know, if the fire station doesn't let you camp out there, well, then you can, you know, I'll put you up, you can camp out in my back. I got a little walk out there. Yeah. What are people really asking for? Daryl, who I told you about at the beginning, Navajo medicine man, my teacher, what he says about, you know, rewinding to the beginning of this story, and this guy, hey, who the heck invited you down? What Daryl calls that is a funny way of asking for help. It's that thing. Yeah. But what's really, help me, I can't breathe, I need love.
It's kind of like the school bully.
Yes, yes. And the bullies never grow up, but they find themselves in these adult bodies.
Right. And everybody judges the bully.
And everyone,
because he's a bully.
yeah.
Yeah, no one likes the bully.
Yeah, the monsters need the love. They're not monsters.
Yeah.
They're humans. Yeah. Even the most convincing, you know. And we all have our own versions of who that is. So at the door, I got my backpack and I thanked him again, and I said, hey, you know, what's your name? I never got your name. And his eyes narrowed again.
What's it to you?
Yeah, and he said, my name? My name's Bond. James Bond. Like, maybe I'll get to tell a story about that one day in Newberry, you know? Couldn't have made that up, you know? And I didn't. So I know there's that follow-up question, but that's the story, you know? And yeah, I'm just like sitting with that, you know, thinking about all the people. Oh man, yeah, all the people, all of us. Needing that connection, deserving that connection, not getting what we need or deserve, you know, over the course of our daily lives. It's heartbreaking, you know, but there's hope, you know, because we can do it for each other. We can do it for each other, you know,
Hope is needed.
and we are. Yeah, that's why I'm here, you know. It's like I'm gonna say yes and breathe some life into this conversation about connection and loving and listening, you know, and suggest that it's just as important to do it. It's always just this moment, you know. It's not, the big show isn't happening somewhere else at the big protest or the White House or the main stage. It's right here. It's this little corner of the garden I've been entrusted with. This little corner plant that is this conversation, you know? And am I showing up to you, and you, and you, you know? Am I seeing you? Am I respecting you right now? And how is listening a part of the gift I'm giving you? Is why I'm here, you know? Yeah.
Is this your life mission, or do you see yourself going in a different direction, but just having this experience in you? I mean, like, do you want to pursue a certain profession, or is this your writing profession and your mission to listen to people and to spread this word?
You never know, you know? Who knows? Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and be like, you know, I think I actually want to be an engineer. Yeah. But I think what I experienced, and like it's one of those things where, I mean, I have to say thank you, you know, because it's not always easy to listen, and it takes endurance, and it's a gift to be listened to, so I have to thank you. And I'll say, yo, we could go for like 4 more hours, yo. Like, there was a year-long walk on the road, man. Like, I got way more, you know? And so I don't imagine that urgency, that the ways that I was transformed, the ways that people inspired me, the ways that I realized there's so much more available to us here in terms of intimacy and depth of connection, even with the so-called boogeymen, you know, the monsters. Like that that does light me on fire. And I have told that story many times, and I'll tell it as many times as people are willing to listen. You know, with the hopes that
It'd be like an awakening.
it'll embolden us, and awaken us, and awaken us to what? Awaken us to our inheritance. That's what I think. Like connecting with you heart to heart is like what I think we were born for. And I don't think it's only possible between certain humans. Oh, I can only go there with, the liberals, or I can only go there with the Pennsylvanians, but the Louisianans, I mean, no. No, it's if you're human, it's possible. And that's what this practice continues to awaken me to. And it continues to take me to the limits of my learning, where I haven't yet learned how to be myself in such a way as to invite you to be yours. You know what I mean by that? To be myself truly and fully and vulnerably and humanly in such a way that you feel emboldened and encouraged to be yourself in that same kind of way. I'm still learning about where I don't know how to do that, I imagine it'll be a life's work. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. It is. Okay, all right. Well, good.
It gets easier.
Oh, cool. Cool. What has gotten easier for you? What has helped it get easier?
Acceptance, age, awful things happening, resilience, knowing a little bit more about who you are and finding out what that is, just, interesting.
Yeah.
I do hope it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to
Yeah.
I think the greatest gift you can give your children is to know that. And it's not easy.
Wow.
They all have different styles and different, but I think that's the greatest gift you can give a child. But I didn't even do that when they were really young. It took me a while to know that.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
life is worth it.
Thank you. I'm with you there. On most days.
Well, yeah, that's part of life.
Yeah, right.
Do you ever wake up in the morning and just say, oh,
Yeah, I did this morning. Yeah, it's like, okay, whew. Yeah, which if we had more time, and if we were in one of those circles, I would be eager to share with you, So, here we are, a couple miles later. Are there any, I've still got my mind on your second question, is there a question or two, or a story, a comment, any kind of sharing that anyone is feeling right now? No expectation.
I'd be curious to start reading, I'll tell you that much.
Okay, all right.
I'm halfway through.
Cool. Thank you.
What you were saying earlier was, this whole experience. I did a program a few years ago, and it was based on an article I read about. There's an Islamic professor in South Carolina. He wrote this article about how we suffer from hurriedness. We just, in the United States, because he's from Persia, in the United States, you see someone you haven't seen for a while, say, hey, how you doing? Oh, good. Everybody just goes their way. But he said in Persia, they have a saying, which I can't pronounce it, but basically what it says is, when you run into someone you haven't seen for a long time, you say, how is your heart? And I was like, wow, that was the whole, I think that's going to be the name of our program, which was the whole, because we don't take time to listen.
Yeah.
And that's what that is listening.
Right.
It's just, we're like, oh, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And we're off.
Yeah.
But to say, how is your heart? That's a whole different answer.
Yeah.
And it involves listening,
Yes.
which is what made me want to come to this program tonight.
Cool. Yeah.
So you've done good.
Is it finished? Am I done? Thank you. Thank you. And another thing cool that I've learned recently is the etymology of the word courage is connected to the word heart, or core. Yeah. So to have courage is to have heart. And I think I can find a way to take what you just shared and connect it with your second question of was I ever resentful or bitter about not being listened to?
Did you ever feel empty? Like you went on this whole walk.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that people were interested in hearing your story?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I received the profound experience of having people accept me, literally accept me into their home. You know what I mean? Maybe they weren't necessarily asking me questions, maybe they weren't listening in certain ways, but there was a fundamental acceptance of who I was, a trust of who I was, a celebration of who I was. And I wish I had more time to tell a story that's coming to mind right now, but just over and over again, people saying to me, people who had been strangers moments before, saying to me, quite literally, thank you for what you're doing. And keep doing it. And even, I love you. You know? And so to be, it's almost like beyond listened to. You know? To be, it's like, yeah, they didn't even need to listen to me. They just, they saw me.
They acknowledged you and saw you. Right?
Yeah.
And that was all you needed then.
And I would say that I'm no different from anybody else. And I think that's the experience we all need and deserve, you know, to be so accepted and trusted. Because what that did for me is it shined a light on the parts of myself that hadn't yet seen myself in the ways that they were seeing me. The part of me that didn't know how to accept the beauty that they were seeing in me. And they were doing it over and over again. And I think one of the hardest things, and it sounds strange, but one of the hardest things was learning how to, and it's a process that continues for me, learning how to believe in my intrinsic, fundamental beauty and goodness, which for many of us who have been told we're anything but, is a hard thing to make a U-turn around and come back to that intrinsic truth of you're beautiful, you're a beautiful being, and inherently you're good. And yeah, you've made mistakes and you've made choices, and sure, and you're good. You never ever deserve to be banished or executed, and yet we do that to each other here. You know, in the social spheres, and quite literally, we execute one another. That's the world we find ourselves in, you know? And so to accept what they were seeing in me was a hard thing to do. And there was a part of me that enjoyed, actually, the fact that they didn't ask me a whole lot of questions about my life, because I was shy in a way and hadn't yet come to believe that I had a story worth listening to myself. Isn't that funny? I was so ready to see that in everybody else, but didn't really believe that about myself. I had to go do something extraordinary before I had anything worth sharing. That was an unconscious belief hanging out down there, you know? And even in the first draft of this book, this book wasn't supposed to be a memoir, people. You know, I didn't want my story in there, really. And after the first draft, the editor said, yo, we don't know who Andrew is. Yeah. And we kind of have to know. You're like kind of the only character who appears in every chapter, you know? So yeah, who are you? So just this process of, okay, this is who I am. This is what I have come to know about myself, and this is what I've experienced, and like, here it is. And yeah, there's stuff I'm still figuring out and finding out, and will you find out with me? Which takes me to your observation of, yeah, what a powerful thing it is to listen to someone in that way, but perhaps even more powerful and even more requiring of courage to be listened to consciously in that way. You know?
You displayed enormous courage taking this trip. And I think it's Maya Angelou who said, without courage, none of the other virtues are possible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, your courage must have come through to people.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a kind of courage I'm still learning, you know, that has to do with, being willing to share myself in the way that I've tried to do in this book, because it's one of those things of if I'm not willing to take the first step, if I'm not willing to do the thing that I'm hoping you might do, you know, that's just unreasonable. You know, that's not. Yeah, it's that osmosis. You know, it's that back and forth. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess each of us has different struggles with different parts of it. You know, for some of us, it's very easy to listen to someone else, and harder to be listened to in that kind of a way. Some people have no problem being listened to. You know what I mean? But struggle to listen, and we're all just making it up as we go, doing our best. You know, that's how I see it.
How were you different from the first step you took to the last step you took? What was the big lesson you learned? Or did you have to sit on it for a long time, to figure out what lesson to learn? Did you feel radically changed at the end?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a slow drip process of integration, and it continues to inform me and transform me.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fundamental difference is that I am no longer I'm no longer really interested in excommunicating or murdering anything or anyone. And by murdering, you know, that's a dramatic way of saying, you know, each and every person. Like the notion that some people are worth listening to and others aren't. Some people are interesting, some are boring. Some people are, you know, cool, some people are kind of dumb. You know, that's just, that was completely dissolved in me. And I may not have the time or energy to listen to everybody. I mean, I don't and won't. But I know that each and every one of you, each and every one of us is a part of this family. And there's that answer, I mean, I hope you check out the book, because it's one of the reasons why I wrote it, you know, is like that there's